I am Lauren, 30, and literally last weekend, my rep as the family anchor? Yeah, it totally backfired. The stability I'd worked my butt off to keep solid, it blew up into a full-on family meltdown at the county courthouse. My mother, Evelyn, straight up demanded I back down from seeking custody of my sister's kids, and when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You're unfit, Lauren," she yelled, with the judge and attorneys staring like I'd just dropped a grenade. But here's the tea. Her shade didn't break me. It lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note, this story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now back to the story. The air in that courtroom felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest as I sat at the petitioner's table, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. My husband, Tom, sat beside me, his thumb brushing against my wrist in a silent promise. "We've got this." Across the room, my mother, Evelyn, perched ramrod straight, her lips pursed into that familiar line of disapproval I'd known since I was a kid. Her gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes, those sharp hazel eyes, darted toward me, not with concern but with judgment. The kind that said, "You'll never be enough." This wasn't just about custody of my sister's two kids, Mia and Ethan, ages 6 and 8. It was the culmination of 30 years of her tearing me down, bit by bit, while I scrambled to prove her wrong. My sister Claire had spiraled into addiction, leaving her kids in limbo, and when Tom and I stepped up to take them in, I thought maybe, just maybe, Evelyn would see me differently. I was wrong. She'd filed her own petition to take the kids, claiming I was unstable and could barely hold a job. The words stung like a slap, but what hurt more was knowing she believed them. I glanced at Mia and Ethan's caseworker, Miss Carter, who sat near the judge's bench, her pen scratching notes. She'd interviewed us, seen our home, our routines. Tom and I had spent weeks preparing, organizing bedrooms, enrolling the kids in school, even setting up a chore chart with star stickers to make them feel secure. I'd poured everything into this, not just for them, but to show I could be the steady one. The one who held it together. But Evelyn's voice cut through the room, steady and cold. "Lauren has always been erratic," she said, addressing the judge. "She's never had the discipline to provide a stable home." My jaw tightened. Erratic? Me? The woman who'd spent her life trying to meet her impossible standards? I wanted to scream, to list every sacrifice, every late night, every time I'd bitten my tongue to keep the peace. Instead, I sat still, my fingers twisting the edge of my blazer. Tom leaned closer, his shoulder brushing mine, grounding me. The judge, a woman with kind but unreadable eyes, adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. Evelyn, can you provide specific examples of this instability?" she asked. Evelyn didn't hesitate. "She's jumped from job to job, never settling. She's always been too emotional, too impulsive." I felt my stomach twist. Emotional, maybe, but impulsive? That was a lie. I'd planned every step of my life with precision, partly to escape her shadow. I caught Mia's drawing in my mind's eye, a crayon sketch of our backyard she'd made last week, with a big yellow sun and Tom pushing her on the swing. That was the life I wanted for them. Stability, love, not Evelyn's rigid, joyless control. As Evelyn continued, listing my supposed failures, I felt that spark she'd ignited flare brighter. She didn't know me, not the real me, and soon she'd have no choice but to see it. As Evelyn's words hung in the air, echoing off the wood-paneled walls of the courtroom, I felt a familiar pull tugging me back through the years. It wasn't the first time she'd painted me as the unreliable one, the daughter who couldn't get it right. My mind drifted to those moments, the ones that had stacked up like bricks in a wall between us, each one a reminder of how invisible I'd always been in her eyes. I stared at the grain of the table in front of me, tracing the swirls with my fingertip, while the judge asked for clarification on one of her points. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, his palm warm against my clammy skin, but even that couldn't anchor me fully in the present. The memories flooded in, sharp and unbidden, as if my brain was replaying a highlight reel of every dismissal. It started small, back when I was 8, at my first piano recital. I'd practiced for months, my small fingers aching from the scales, staying up past bedtime to get the notes just right. The living room had been my stage, with Evelyn sitting on the edge of the couch, her arms crossed, nodding occasionally but never smiling. When the day came, I played Fur Elise without a single mistake, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The audience clapped, and my teacher hugged me, whispering how proud she was. But later, at dinner, Evelyn barely mentioned it. "Claire got an A on her spelling test today," she said instead, beaming at my sister across the table. Claire, 2 years older, flashed a grin, her ponytail swinging. I poked at my peas, the fork scraping the plate, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. My achievement? It evaporated like it never happened. I remember slipping away to my room, curling up with my stuffed bear, whispering to myself that next time I'd do better, make her notice. By high school, the pattern was set in stone. I joined the debate team, loving the rush of arguing a point, researching late into the night with stacks of library books on my desk. We won regionals my junior year, and I was named Best Speaker. I rushed home, trophy in hand, the cheap gold plastic gleaming under the kitchen light. "Mom, look," I said, thrusting it toward her. She glanced up from chopping vegetables, her knife pausing mid-slice. "That's nice, dear. But have you seen Claire's acceptance letter? She's going to state college on a scholarship." Claire, always the golden child, with her straight A's in math and science, her path to becoming a nurse laid out like a neat roadmap. I set the trophy on the counter, where it sat untouched until I moved it to my shelf myself. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan whirring above, my fists clenched in the sheets. Why wasn't my win enough? Why did it always circle back to Claire? College amplified it all. I majored in psychology, fascinated by how minds worked, especially after watching Claire struggle with her own demons early on. I graduated magna cum laude, walking across that stage in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for Evelyn's face. She was there, clapping politely, but afterward, at the family lunch, it was Claire's promotion at the hospital that dominated the talk. "She's saving lives now," Evelyn said, her voice swelling with pride, while passing the bread basket. I nodded, forcing a smile, my diploma folded in my bag like an afterthought. I remember excusing myself to the bathroom, splashing water on my face, gripping the sink until my knuckles whitened. The mirror reflected back a woman who was succeeding, but not in the ways that mattered to her. Claire's conventional path, nurse, married young, kids, was the benchmark. My explorations, my quiet ambitions, they were just phases to Evelyn. Even in my 20s, as I navigated early adulthood, the invisibility persisted. I landed a job as a legal assistant right out of college, diving into case files, learning the ins and outs of the court system. It was grueling, but I thrived, staying late to help on pro bono cases, my desk lamp the last one on in the office. When I got promoted after 2 years, I called home, excitement bubbling in my voice. "Mom, I made senior assistant." There was a pause on the line, the faint hum of her TV in the background. "That's good, Lauren. Did you hear Claire just bought a house? She's really settling down." I hung up, the phone slipping from my hand onto the couch, where I sank down, hugging a pillow to my chest. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness exactly, but from the exhaustion of always chasing her approval. Tom, whom I'd met at work, found me there later, pulling me into a hug, his chin resting on my head. "She doesn't see you," he murmured, and I nodded, wiping my face on his shirt. These flashbacks weren't random. They were the foundation of why we were here now. Evelyn's testimony droned on, her voice listing more examples, like the time I switched firms for a better opportunity, which she called flighty. I shifted in my seat, the wooden chair creaking under me, my heel tapping a silent rhythm on the floor. The caseworker jotted something down, her expression neutral. Mia and Ethan's faces flashed in my mind. Their wide eyes when we picked them up from foster care temporarily, how Ethan clung to my leg, Mia asking if we'd keep them safe. I had to win this, not just for them but to break the cycle. Evelyn wrapped up her statement, folding her hands in her lap, looking satisfied. The judge turned to our lawyer. "Cross-examination?" My heart raced. This was it, the moment where the past met the present, and I wondered if she'd ever truly see me. Our lawyer, Mr. Harlan, stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate fingers, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He approached the witness stand where Evelyn sat, her posture still rigid, like she was bracing for a storm she didn't believe would come. "Mrs. Evelyn," he began, his voice steady. "You've painted quite a picture of your daughter Lauren as unstable and unreliable. But let's dig a bit deeper into that. When was the last time you discussed her career with her?" Evelyn blinked, her hands folding tighter in her lap. "We talk often enough," she replied, her tone clipped. "She mentions jobs here and there, but nothing steady." Mr. Harlan nodded, pacing a step or two, his shoes clicking softly on the tile floor. "And what exactly do you believe her current job is?" Evelyn's eyes flicked to me for a split second, then back. "Some sort of assistant, I think, in an office." I felt Tom's hand tighten on mine under the table, his thumb pressing into my palm. This was the setup the moment we'd planned, but hearing it unfold made my pulse thunder in my ears. As Mr. Harlan continued his questions, probing gently but relentlessly, my mind slipped away again, this time not to the pains of the past, but to the turning point that had changed everything. It was 5 years ago, almost to the day, in the quiet of our apartment kitchen. Tom and I had just gotten married, and I'd come home from another family gathering where Evelyn had dismissed my role as a legal assistant as just filing papers. I'd slammed the door behind me, harder than intended, the sound echoing through the hall. Tom looked up from chopping onions for dinner, his knife pausing midair. "Rough night?" he asked, wiping his hands on a dish towel. I dropped my purse on the counter, the keys clattering, and sank into a chair, my elbows on the table, head in my hands. "She did it again," I muttered, my voice muffled. "Acted like what I do doesn't matter. Like I'm still the kid who couldn't stick with anything." Tom pulled out the chair next to me, sitting close, his knee bumping mine. "Lauren, you know that's not true. You're amazing at your job. The partners rave about you." I lifted my head, meeting his eyes, those warm brown ones that always saw me clearly. "But she doesn't see it, she never will." That night, as we ate stir-fry at the table, the conversation shifted. Tom forked a piece of broccoli, chewing thoughtfully. "What if you did something she couldn't ignore? Something big?" I laughed bitterly, sipping my water. "Like what? Become president?" He set down his fork, leaning forward. "No, seriously. You've talked about law school before. You love the work, the cases, the justice part. Why not go for it, become a lawyer?" I stared at him, the idea sparking something deep inside, like a match striking in the dark. I'd thought about it in college, but Evelyn had steered me away, saying it was too competitive, too unstable for someone like you. But sitting there, with the steam from our plates rising between us, I felt a shift. "In secret?" I whispered, the words hanging. Tom grinned, reaching for my hand. "Why not? Prove it to yourself first." We talked late into the night, the clock ticking past midnight, planning it out. Online applications, night classes, keeping it from the family to avoid the doubt that would flood in. The struggle began immediately. I enrolled in a part-time program at the local university, juggling my full-time job with classes 3 nights a week. The first semester was brutal. I'd come home exhausted, my eyes burning from reading case law under the desk lamp. Tom would have coffee ready, rubbing my shoulders as I hunched over textbooks, highlighting passages until my fingers cramped. "You got this," he'd say, kissing my forehead. There were nights I wanted to quit, like after a grueling torts exam where I second-guessed every answer, pacing the living room floor, my socks whispering on the carpet. "What if I'm not cut out for this?" I'd ask Tom, collapsing onto the couch beside him. He'd pull me close, his arm around my shoulders. "Remember why you're doing it. Not for her. For you." I'd nod, drawing strength from his steady presence, and dive back in. Year 2 brought clerkships, interning at the courthouse during lunch breaks, filing motions and observing trials. I thrived in the chaos, my mind sharpening with each argument I prepared. But hiding it grew harder. Family calls came, Evelyn probing. "Still at that assistant job?" I'd mumble yes, changing the subject, my free hand twisting the phone cord. The deception weighed on me, but so did the fear of her criticism derailing me. Graduation came quietly. Tom and I celebrated with takeout champagne in our living room, toasting under the string lights we'd hung. "To Judge Lauren someday," he joked, clinking glasses. But it wasn't a joke. I passed the bar on my first try, my hands shaking as I opened the envelope, tears blurring the words "congratulations." Entry-level positions followed, prosecuting small cases, building my reputation step by step. Then the appointment, 2 years ago, to the family court bench. It was a rigorous process. Interviews, background checks, Senate confirmation. I sat in those hearings, my suit pressed, answering questions with poise I'd honed through years of debate and doubt. When the call came, I was in my office, staring at the phone as it rang. "Judge Thompson," the voice said, and I gripped the desk edge, my nails digging into the wood. Tom met me at home with flowers, spinning me around in a hug. We kept it secret still, my job to the family remaining vague. It was my armor, my proof. Back in the courtroom, Mr. Harlan's voice pulled me present. "Mrs. Evelyn, are you aware that Lauren has been a family court judge for the past 6 years?" The room froze. Evelyn's face drained of color, her mouth opening slightly, hands unclenching in her lap. I met her gaze, steady now, that hidden success no longer mine alone. As the question lingered in the stunned silence of the courtroom, Evelyn's eyes widening in confusion, her fingers now gripping the edge of the witness stand like she needed it to stay upright, my thoughts pulled me back to the days before this hearing. It wasn't the shock on her face that did it, but the weight of how we'd gotten here, the careful, tense preparations Tom and I had made, knowing full well she was gunning for us. The judge cleared her throat, breaking the moment, but in my head, I was already rewinding to that evening 2 weeks ago, when the storm of this custody battle was truly brewing in our living room. Tom and I were sitting on the couch after putting Mia and Ethan to bed temporarily. They'd been with us on an emergency placement while Claire's situation unfolded. The kids' laughter from bath time still echoed faintly, but the mood shifted as we spread out the legal documents on the coffee table. Folders stacked high, papers spilling onto the floor, each one a piece of our case for permanent custody. Tom rubbed his temples, his glasses perched on his nose as he scanned the petition Evelyn had filed. "She really did it," he said, his voice low, not wanting to wake the kids. I nodded, my stomach nodding as I picked up her statement, the words blurring slightly under the lamplight. "Unstable, unfit, can't hold a job." I read aloud, my finger tracing the lines she'd typed, or had her lawyer type, but it was her voice in every accusation. Tom reached over, his hand covering mine, stopping the tremble I hadn't noticed. "She's wrong, Lauren, we know that, but we have to prove it." We'd known about Claire's relapse for months, her addiction pulling her under again, leaving Mia and Ethan in foster care briefly before we stepped in. The call from Child Services had come on a rainy afternoon. I was in my chambers at work, wrapping up a case, when my phone buzzed. "Your sister's kids need placement," the social worker said. Tom and I didn't hesitate. We drove straight to pick them up, their small bags in hand, Ethan's eyes wide and scared, Mia clutching a worn teddy bear. That night, as they slept in the guest room, we whispered in the kitchen about making it official. "They need stability," Tom said, stirring his tea, the spoon clinking against the mug. I agreed, but deep down, I knew Evelyn would insert herself. She always did. Now, in our living room prep session, Mr. Harlan joined us via video call, his face pixelated on my laptop screen, tie loosened like he'd had a long day too. "All right, let's go over the strategy," he said, shuffling papers on his end. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees as he outlined Evelyn's petition. "She's claiming you're erratic, job-hopping, emotionally volatile. We'll counter with character witnesses, your home evaluation, and the kids' adjustment reports." Tom jotted notes on a legal pad, his pen scratching quickly. "What about her own history?" he asked. "Claire's issues started under her roof." Mr. Harlan shook his head. "We don't attack unless necessary, focus on positives." I stared at the screen, my reflection in the corner showing the fatigue lines around my eyes. Positives like my career, the one Evelyn knew nothing about. "Should we reveal it?" I asked, my voice hesitant. Tom glanced at me, knowing what I meant. Mr. Harlan paused. "Your judgeship? It's a bombshell, but timing is key. Save it for Cross if she testifies against you." The conversation turned to specifics. I described our daily routine, breakfast together, school drop-offs, homework help. "Mia loves reading with you," Tom added, smiling faintly. "Ethan's soccer games, we're there every Saturday." Mr. Harlan nodded. "Good, humanize it, show the bond." But as we talked, Evelyn's opposition loomed like a shadow. She'd called me the day after we filed, her voice sharp over the phone. "You're not ready for this, Lauren. Those kids need structure, not your chaos." I'd gripped the receiver, my knuckles white, biting back words. "We're doing this for them," I'd said instead, hanging up before she could dig deeper. Now, recounting it to Mr. Harlan, I felt the anger bubble up. She doesn't know me, I said, my fist clenching on the couch cushion. Tom rubbed my back in slow circles. That's why we'll show her. We practiced my testimony next. Mr. Harlan role-played the opposing counsel, firing questions. Why do you think you're better suited than your mother? I straightened, drawing a breath. Because I've built a life of stability. I have a home, a supportive marriage, and a career dedicated to families like this. He pushed harder. But your job history? Gaps? Changes? I met the camera's gaze. Each move was upward, building expertise. It was true but veiled. My path from assistant to lawyer to judge, all under the radar. Tom watched, nodding encouragement, his foot tapping nervously. As the call wrapped, Mr. Harlan signed off with, "Stay calm. We've got a strong case." The screen went dark, leaving Tom and me in the quiet room, the clock ticking on the wall. I stood, pacing to the window, peering out at the streetlights flickering on. "What if it's not enough?" I whispered, my arms crossed tight over my chest. Tom came up behind me, his hands on my shoulders. "It will be, and if she pushes, we drop the truth." I leaned back into him, his chin on my head. We knew the risk. Revealing my role could complicate things, perceptions of bias in family court circles, but it was our ace. The kids' drawings pinned to the fridge caught my eye, stick figures of us four labeled my family. That's what this was about. Not proving Evelyn wrong, but securing their future. As we cleared the table, folding papers away, I felt the tension coil tighter. The hearing just days away. Little did I know how dramatically it would unfold. Back in the courtroom, as Evelyn stammered her response, the memories faded, pulling me fully into the now. Evelyn stammered, her voice catching like a skipped record, her eyes darting from Mr. Harlan to me and back again. "No," she finally managed, the word coming out sharp but unsteady, her fingers now twisting the hem of her sleeve. "No, I'm not aware of that. It must be a mistake." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The only sound, the faint rustle of papers from the caseworker's notebook. Mr. Harlan paused, letting the moment stretch, his expression neutral as he adjusted his notes on the podium. "A mistake? Interesting. Well, let's set that aside for now, and explore what you are aware of regarding your daughter's life and stability. You've mentioned her job history. Can you elaborate on why you believe she can barely hold a job?" Evelyn straightened slightly, regaining some composure. Her chin lifting in that familiar way that signaled she was digging in. I felt my nails dig into my palms under the table, the sting grounding me as I braced for what was coming. She leaned forward a bit, her gaze locking onto the judge now, avoiding me entirely. "Lauren has always been flighty," she said, her tone laced with that condescending pity I'd heard 1,000 times. From the time she was a teenager, she'd start something with all this enthusiasm, then drop it when it got hard. Jobs, hobbies, even relationships before Tom. Tom shifted beside me, his jaw tightening, but he kept his hand steady on my knee. The judge nodded for her to continue, her pen hovering over her legal pad. Evelyn took the cue, her words flowing smoother now, like she'd rehearsed this. "Take her first job out of high school, waitressing at that diner. She lasted 3 months before quitting because it wasn't fulfilling. Then college, where she switched majors twice. Psychology? What a waste when she could have done something practical like Claire." I felt a flush creep up my neck, my ears burning. Practical. Always the jab at my choices, as if understanding people was less valuable than nursing shifts. Mr. Harlan interjected gently, pacing a slow step to the side. "And her employment after college? You mentioned she's an assistant of some sort." Evelyn nodded vigorously, her bun bobbing slightly. "Yes, legal assistant or whatever she calls it. But she's bounced between firms. 3 and 5 years, last I heard. Always chasing something better, but never sticking. It's unstable, Your Honor. How can someone like that provide for children?" Her voice rose a notch, laced with mock concern, her eyes finally flicking to me with a look that said, "See what you've done?" I wanted to stand up, to counter every lie with the truth, but our strategy was patience. Tom whispered under his breath, so low only I could hear, "Breathe." I did, inhaling slowly, feeling the air fill my lungs as I unclenched my fists, one finger at a time. The lawyer pressed on, his voice even. "Can you give specific examples of this instability in her personal life?" Evelyn's lips curved into a thin smile, not kind but satisfied, like she'd been waiting for this. Oh, plenty. Remember when she moved out at 22? Rented that tiny apartment, but within a year she was back home for months because she couldn't afford it. Impulsive decision, no planning. That wasn't true. I'd moved back to help with Claire's first bout of issues, but Evelyn twisted it. She continued, her hands gesturing now, more animated. And her emotions? Always up and down. Crying over little things, arguing when she doesn't get her way, like last Christmas, when she stormed out because I suggested she think about a real career. Stormed out? I'd left quietly after she belittled my office job in front of everyone, my throat tight with unshed tears. I glanced at the caseworker hoping she saw through it, but her face remained blank, pen scratching away. As Evelyn spoke, I felt the weight of each word like a pebble added to a pile on my chest, making it harder to breathe. Micro-movements betrayed her, the way she smoothed her skirt repeatedly, a tell of her nervousness despite the bravado, the quick lick of her lips before each accusation. Mr. Harlan circled back. You say she's emotional. Has she ever been diagnosed with any mental health issues? Evelyn hesitated, her eyes narrowing. Not that I know of, but she doesn't share much. She's secretive, always has been. Hides things because she knows they're not up to par. Secretive. The irony burned. I'd hidden my success to protect it from exactly this, her dismissal. Tom squeezed my hand again, his thumb circling my wrist, a silent reminder of our life together, away from her shadow. The questions kept coming, each one prompting more barbs. What about her marriage to Tom? Do you see that as stable? Evelyn's nose wrinkled slightly. Tom's a good man, but Lauren, she's dragged him along with her whims. They don't have kids of their own yet, probably because she knows she couldn't handle it. That one hit hard. My stomach twisted, and I had to look down at the table, tracing the wood grain to steady myself. We'd chosen to wait, building our careers, but to her, it was failure. Mr. Harlan noted it down. And her relationship with her sister, Claire? Evelyn sighed dramatically, her shoulders rising and falling. Strained, because Lauren's always jealous. Claire's achieved so much, a nurse, a mother, while Lauren, well, she's still figuring it out at 30. Jealous? I'd supported Claire through everything, visits to rehab, babysitting the kids, but Evelyn painted me as the villain. The barrage felt endless, each condescending remark chipping away, but inside, that spark from earlier flickered stronger. I wasn't the girl she described anymore. As Mr. Harlan wrapped his line of questioning, promising to circle back to my career, Evelyn sat back looking smug, her hands folded neatly. The judge called for a brief recess, but the damage lingered in the air. I stood with Tom, my legs shaky as we stepped into the hall. He pulled me into a quick hug, his arms solid. She's wrong, he murmured. Hold on. I nodded, wiping a stray tear, ready for the next round. The recess ended and we filed back into the courtroom, the air now thick with anticipation, like the calm before a lightning strike. I sat back at the petitioner's table, my hands folded tightly in my lap, the fabric of my skirt creased from gripping it earlier. Tom's knee brushed mine under the table, a steady anchor as Evelyn returned to the witness stand, her posture still rigid, her lips set in a line that screamed certainty. The judge adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable, and nodded to Evelyn's attorney, Mr. Daniels, to proceed with redirect. He stood, smoothing his tie, and began reinforcing her testimony, his voice smooth and calculated. Mrs. Thompson, you've outlined concerns about Lauren's stability. To clarify, why do you believe you're better suited to raise Mia and Ethan? My heart thudded, each beat loud in my ears as I braced for the moment this hearing would shift from accusations to a formal verdict against me. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the stand, her knuckles pale. I've raised 2 daughters successfully, she began, her voice steady now, regaining its earlier confidence. Claire, despite her struggles, became a nurse, a mother, a pillar of the community before her issues. I know what it takes to provide structure, discipline, a proper home. She paused, her eyes flicking briefly to me, not with warmth, but with a kind of pity that stung worse than anger. Lauren, bless her, has never shown that capacity. She's erratic, always chasing dreams that don't pan out. These children need consistency, not someone who might up and change her life on a whim. I felt my jaw clench, my teeth grinding silently. Tom's hand found mine again, his fingers lacing through mine, squeezing just enough to keep me grounded. Mr. Daniels nodded, pacing a step. And your plans for the children? How would their lives look under your care? Evelyn's face softened, but it was a practiced softness, the kind she used at family gatherings to seem maternal. They'd live with me in my home, 3 bedrooms, a big backyard, excellent schools nearby. I'd enroll them in extracurriculars like piano for Mia, soccer for Ethan, just as I did for my girls. Her voice took on a nostalgic tone, but it rang hollow to me. I remembered those piano lessons, the way she'd hover, correcting every missed note, never praising the effort. I'm retired now, she continued, so I have the time to focus on them, unlike Lauren, who's always working late at her office job. The way she said it, the slight sneer in her tone, made my fingers curl into my palm, the nails biting into skin. The judge scribbled something, her pen scratching faintly, then looked up. Mrs. Thompson, you're aware the children have been temporarily placed with Lauren and Tom. Have you visited their home to assess their environment? Evelyn's lips pursed, her fingers twitching slightly on the stand. I haven't been invited, she said, her voice tightening. But I don't need to see it to know it's not suitable. Lauren's never been able to maintain anything long-term. The lie stung, sharp and personal. Our home was ready. Beds made, toys organized, a chore chart on the fridge with Ethan's messy stars and Mia's careful check marks. I'd spent hours making it theirs, tucking them in each night, reading stories until their eyes drooped. Mr. Daniels wrapped up, his tone final. Your Honor, based on Mrs. Thompson's testimony, we move that custody be granted to her, as she's the more stable and experienced caregiver. My breath caught, the words hitting like a punch. Tom's grip tightened, his thumb pressing hard against my knuckles. Mr. Harlan stood, objecting calmly, but the judge raised a hand. I'll hear from the petitioners next. But first, Mrs. Thompson, you're effectively disowning your daughter's ability to parent. Is that your stance? Evelyn didn't hesitate, her gaze steady on the judge, avoiding me entirely. Yes, Your Honor, for the children's sake, I believe they'd be better off with me. The room seemed to shrink, the air heavy, as if her words had sucked out all the oxygen. Disowned, not just in her eyes but now in open court, laid bare for everyone to hear. The caseworker, Miss Carter, shifted in her seat, her pen pausing as she glanced at me, her expression softening for the first time. I felt a tear prick my eye but blinked it back, refusing to let Evelyn see me crack. The judge nodded, her voice measured. Very well, we'll proceed with the petitioner's testimony after a short break. As she called for another recess, the gavel's sharp crack echoed and I felt it reverberate in my chest. Tom leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. She's digging her own grave, he whispered. I nodded, my throat tight, but the spark inside me flared hotter. She'd just drawn the line, declared me unfit in front of a judge, a room full of strangers, and the kid's future on the line. We stood, my legs unsteady, and stepped into the hallway. I leaned against the cool wall, my hands pressed flat against it, trying to steady my breathing. Tom stood in front of me, blocking the world, his hands on my shoulders. You're not that person she described, he said, his voice low but fierce. You're a judge, Lauren. You're their home. I looked up at him, his brown eyes steady, and felt a resolve settle in. Mia and Ethan's faces flashed in my mind, their small hands in mine, their trust. This wasn't just about proving her wrong anymore, it was about them. As we headed back in, I straightened my blazer, my heels clicking on the floor, ready for what came next. The truth was waiting, and it was sharper than her words. The courtroom doors swung open as we returned from the recess, the faint hum of voices settling into a tense hush. I took my seat beside Tom, my hands smoothing the creases in my skirt, the fabric cool under my fingers. Evelyn sat back at her table, her posture still rigid but her eyes darted nervously now, as if Mr. Harlan's earlier question about my career lingered like a ghost she couldn't shake. The judge called the room to order, her gavel a sharp punctuation, and turned to Mr. Harlan. You may proceed with your cross-examination of Mrs. Thompson. My heart thudded, a steady drumbeat in my chest, as Mr. Harlan stood, his notes in hand, his face calm but his eyes glinting with purpose. This was it, the moment we'd planned for, the one where the truth I'd hidden for years would finally break free. Mr. Harlan approached the witness stand, his steps deliberate, the click of his shoes echoing faintly. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his voice smooth but firm, let's revisit your earlier testimony about Lauren's employment. You stated you believe she's an assistant, correct? And that she's been unable to hold a steady job? Evelyn nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line, her fingers clutching the edge of the stand. Yes, that's right, she said, her tone clipped, as if daring him to challenge her. He tilted his head slightly, a small gesture that carried weight. And you're certain of this? You've had no indication of any significant achievements in her career? Evelyn's brow furrowed, her hands shifting to smooth her skirt, a nervous tick I recognized from years of watching her deflect. She's never mentioned anything noteworthy, she said, her voice firm but with a slight waver. If there was something, I'd know. I felt Tom's hand brush mine under the table, his fingers warm and steady, a silent signal. Here it comes. Mr. Harlan paused, letting her words hang, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to introduce evidence that may clarify Mrs. Thompson's understanding of her daughter's professional status. The judge nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly with curiosity. Mr. Harlan reached into his briefcase, pulling out a sealed envelope, the kind with an official stamp that made the room feel heavier. He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. This is a certified document from the State Judicial Commission, confirming Lauren Thompson's appointment as a family court judge 6 years ago, a position she has held with distinction. The courtroom seemed to freeze. Evelyn's face went slack, her mouth parting slightly, her hands dropping to her lap like they'd lost all strength. A murmur rippled through the small crowd, attorneys, the caseworker, a few observers in the back. Miss Carter's pen stopped mid-scratch, her eyes flicking to me with a mix of surprise and something like respect. The judge raised an eyebrow, scanning the document, then looked at Evelyn. Mrs. Thompson, were you unaware that your daughter is a sitting judge in this very court system? Evelyn's lips moved, but no sound came at first. She swallowed hard, her neck muscles tightening. No, I didn't know, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes met mine for the first time, wide and searching, like she was seeing a stranger. Mr. Harlan didn't let up. So, your testimony about her instability, her inability to hold a job, was based on incomplete information? Evelyn's hands clenched again, her knuckles white. I based it on what I knew, she said, her voice sharper now, defensive. She never told me. Mr. Harlan nodded, almost sympathetically. And why do you think that might be? That someone would keep such an accomplishment from their own mother? The question landed like a stone, and Evelyn flinched, her fingers twisting her sleeve. She didn't answer, her silence louder than any words. I felt a pang in my chest. Not triumph yet, but a raw, aching validation. She hadn't known because I hadn't trusted her to value it. The judge interjected, her tone measured but firm. Counselor, are you suggesting Mrs. Thompson's testimony is unreliable due to her lack of knowledge about her daughter's career? Mr. Harlan turned, his hands clasped behind his back. I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that her assessment of Lauren's stability is fundamentally flawed, rooted in outdated or incorrect assumptions. He gestured toward me, his voice rising slightly. Lauren Thompson has presided over hundreds of family court cases, ensuring the welfare of children like Mia and Ethan. Her home, her marriage, her professional record, all demonstrate the stability Mrs. Thompson claims she lacks. Evelyn's face flushed, her lips trembling as she tried to regain her footing. She's not ready for children, she said weakly. But the conviction was gone, her words crumbling under the weight of the truth. The judge leaned forward, her pen tapping once. Mrs. Thompson, your petition hinges on your daughter's alleged instability. This new information raises serious questions about your credibility on that point. Evelyn looked down, her shoulders slumping, her hands now still in her lap. Mr. Harlan turned to me, a small nod signaling the shift to our testimony next. I felt Tom's hand squeeze mine, his thumb circling my wrist, and I drew a deep breath, the air steadying me. The spark inside flared into a flame, not of anger but of certainty. The kids' faces flashed in my mind. Mia's shy smile when I braided her hair, Ethan's laugh when Tom tossed a football with him. This was their future, and mine, laid bare. As the judge called for our side to present, I straightened in my seat, ready to step into the light I'd hidden for so long. The judge's voice cut through the charged air, her words precise as she called for our testimony. Miss Thompson, you may take the stand. My legs felt unsteady as I stood, smoothing my blazer, the fabric cool against my palms. Tom gave my hand one last squeeze, his eyes steady, whispering, "You've got this." I nodded, my heels clicking on the tile floor as I moved to the witness stand, the weight of every eye in the room pressing against me. Evelyn sat at her table, her face pale, her hands folded tightly, her earlier confidence shattered by the revelation of my judgeship. The bailiff swore me in, my right hand raised, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. As I sat, I met the judge's gaze, calm, expectant, and felt a surge of clarity. This wasn't just about custody. It was about dismantling the narrative Evelyn had built around me. Mr. Harlan approached, his expression warm but professional. "Lauren, let's start with your career. Can you confirm your current position?" I took a breath, my hands resting lightly on the stand, fingers brushing the smooth wood. "I'm a family court judge, appointed 6 years ago, serving in this county's judicial system." A faint murmur rippled through the courtroom, and I saw Miss Carter, the caseworker, lean forward slightly, her pen poised. Evelyn's eyes were fixed on the table in front of her, her lips pressed so tight they nearly vanished. Mr. Harlan nodded. "And how long have you maintained this role, and what does it entail?" I straightened, my voice clear. 6 years. I preside over cases involving custody, adoption, and child welfare, ensuring decisions prioritize the children's best interests. I paused, glancing at the judge, who nodded for me to continue. It requires stability, fairness, and a deep understanding of family dynamics. Mr. Harlan paced a step, his hands clasped behind him. "Stability. That's a key point, given your mother's testimony. Can you describe your life with Tom and how you've prepared to care for Mia and Ethan?" I leaned forward slightly, my hands steady now. "Tom and I have been married for 8 years. We own a 3-bedroom home, mortgage paid on time, in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Since the kids came to us, we've set up their rooms, enrolled them in school, and established routines: homework, meals, bedtime story." My voice softened, thinking of Mia's giggle when I read her favorite book, Ethan's proud grin when he scored a soccer goal. We're there for their games, their school events. We've built a home where they feel safe, loved. Evelyn's attorney, Mr. Daniels, stood for cross-examination, his tone sharper now, trying to regain ground. "Miss Thompson, you kept your judgeship a secret from your mother. Why? Doesn't that suggest a lack of trust, perhaps instability in your family relationships?" The question stung, but I was ready. I looked directly at him, then briefly at Evelyn, whose eyes flicked up to meet mine for a moment before dropping again. "I kept it private because I wanted to protect it," I said, my voice steady but raw. "Growing up, my achievements were often dismissed or compared to my sisters. I didn't tell my mother because I needed to build my career without her doubt undermining me." The words hung heavy, and I saw Miss Carter's pen pause, her gaze softening. Evelyn's shoulders slumped further, her hands twisting her sleeve. Mr. Harlan stepped in again, his voice gentle but pointed. "Lauren, your mother claimed you're unfit, erratic. How do you respond to that?" I took a deep breath, my fingers brushing the stand's edge, grounding me. Her view is based on a version of me that doesn't exist. I've built a stable life, a career dedicated to helping families, a marriage rooted in partnership, a home ready for Mia and Ethan. Her accusations come from not knowing me, from assuming I'm still the teenager she criticized. I paused, my eyes locking on Evelyn's now, her face pale, her hands still. "I'm not that person. I'm a judge, a wife, and someone ready to be a mother to those kids. They're not a project, they're family." The judge leaned forward, her pen tapping once. "Miss Thompson, one final question. Why do you want custody of Mia and Ethan?" My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady, picturing their faces. "Because they deserve a home where they're seen, valued, and loved unconditionally. Tom and I can give them that. A place to grow, to heal, to be themselves. I know what it's like to feel invisible, and I won't let them feel that way." The room was silent, the weight of my words settling over everyone. Even Mr. Daniels hesitated before sitting down, his cross-examination deflated. As I stepped down, my legs trembled slightly, but I felt lighter, like a weight had lifted. Evelyn's gaze followed me, conflicted, her hands now limp in her lap. The judge announced her ruling would come after a brief deliberation, but Mr. Harlan leaned close as I sat, whispering, "You nailed it." Tom's arm slid around my shoulders, his warmth steadying me. I'd exposed her hypocrisy, not with anger, but with truth. As we waited, I glanced at Miss Carter, who gave a small nod, her notebook closed now. The spark inside me burned steady, no longer just defiance but purpose. I'd laid my life bare, not for Evelyn's approval, but for the kids. For us. Whatever came next, I'd walked away from her shadow. The judge's gavel fell with a decisive crack, granting Tom and me full custody of Mia and Ethan, the words ringing in my ears like a bell signaling the end of a long fight. As we left the courtroom, Tom's hand in mine, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to unravel, though Evelyn's defeated posture, her head bowed, hands clasped tightly as she hurried out, lingered in my mind. That evening, back at home, the contrast couldn't have been sharper. The living room was warm, lit by the soft glow of string lights we'd hung for the kids, the air filled with the scent of pizza and the sound of Ethan's giggles. Mia sat cross-legged on the rug, her crayons scattered, drawing a picture of a house with 4 stick figures labeled Us. Tom sprawled beside her, pretending to steal a crayon, earning a playful swat. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, my arms crossed loosely, a smile tugging at my lips. This was the family I'd fought for, the one that felt real. I sank onto the couch, tucking my legs under me, watching as Ethan bounded over to show me his latest Lego creation, a wobbly spaceship he swore could fly to Mars. "Look, Lauren," he said, thrusting it toward me, his eyes bright. I took it carefully, turning it over in my hands, feeling the sharp edges of the plastic blocks. "This is amazing, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. He beamed, then darted back to his pile of Legos. Mia glanced up, her pencil pausing. "Are we staying here forever now?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. I met her gaze, my heart squeezing. "Yeah, sweetheart. This is home." She nodded, returning to her drawing, her shoulders relaxing as she added a sun above the house. Tom caught my eye, his expression soft, and slid onto the couch beside me, his arm draping over my shoulders. "You did it," he murmured, his voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. I leaned into him, my head resting against his chest, the steady thump of his heartbeat grounding me. "We did it," I corrected, my fingers tracing the edge of the couch cushion. The courtroom felt a world away now, Evelyn's accusations fading like a bad dream. Here, with the kids' laughter and Tom's warmth, I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. This wasn't just a win in court, it was a choice to build something better than the family I'd come from. I thought of Evelyn, how she'd rushed out without a word, her face a mask of shock and shame. Part of me wondered if she'd reach out, try to bridge the gap, but I pushed the thought aside. Tonight wasn't about her. It was about Mia, who now hummed softly as she colored, and Ethan, who was narrating a space battle with his Legos, complete with sound effects. I stood, grabbing a slice of pizza from the box on the coffee table, the cheese still warm and stretchy. "Who wants to play a game?" I asked, folding up the deck of Uno cards we'd bought for family nights. Ethan's hand shot up, pizza sauce on his chin, while Mia grinned, already clearing her crayons. Tom groaned dramatically. "Not again, you always win." But he was already shuffling the deck, his fingers deft. As we played, the cards slapping down on the table, laughter erupting when Ethan hit Tom with a draw 4, I felt something settle inside me. This was my chosen family, not bound by blood alone, but by love, by showing up. Unlike the courtroom, where every word was measured, here, I could be unguarded. I caught Mia sneaking an extra card, her giggle giving her away, and instead of calling her out, I winked, letting it slide. Tom raised an eyebrow, mouthing, "Cheater," and I stifled a laugh, tossing a pepperoni at him. He caught it, popping it into his mouth with a grin. The game stretched late, past the kids' usual bedtime, but we let it go, savoring the moment. When Mia yawned, her cards slipping from her hand, I scooped her up, her small body warm against mine. "Time for bed," I said softly, carrying her to her room, Tom following with Ethan slung over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, both of them laughing. We tucked them in, Mia clutching her teddy bear, Ethan insisting his spaceship stay on the nightstand for protection. I kissed their foreheads, the scent of their shampoo lingering as I turned off the light. Back in the living room, Tom and I cleaned up, stacking plates, folding the pizza box. He paused, leaning against the counter, his hands in his pockets. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Better than okay, this is what I wanted." He pulled me into a hug, his chin resting on my head, and for a moment we just stood there, the quiet of the house wrapping around us. The contrast to Evelyn's cold judgment was stark. This warmth, this trust, was what family should be. As I pulled back, smiling up at him, I knew we'd built something unbreakable, something she could never touch. The morning after the custody ruling, sunlight streamed through our kitchen window, catching the steam rising from my coffee mug as I sat at the table, staring at my phone. Evelyn had called twice already, her name flashing on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. The house was quiet, Mia and Ethan at school, Tom at work, and the silence gave me space to process the fallout. The courtroom victory felt monumental, but Evelyn's shadow lingered, her stunned face etched in my mind. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and replayed her voicemails. "Lauren, we need to talk," she said in the first, her voice tight, almost pleading. The second was sharper. "You can't just cut me out after that spectacle." I set the phone down, my fingers tapping the mug's handle, feeling the weight of her words but also the power of my own boundaries. I stood, pacing to the sink, the dishes from last night's pizza night still stacked there. As I scrubbed a plate, the sponge squeaking against ceramic, I thought about how to handle her. She'd underestimated me for years, dismissed my worth, and now, faced with the truth of my judgeship, she was scrambling. I wasn't the same daughter who'd shrunk under her criticism. The courtroom had been my line in the sand, and I wasn't about to let her cross it without clear rules. I dried my hands, the towel rough against my skin, and grabbed a notepad from the counter, jotting down what I needed to say. Structure, clarity, those were my tools now, not just as a judge but as a woman claiming her space. The doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting through my thoughts. I froze, glancing at the clock, barely 9 a.m. My stomach tightened as I walked to the door, peering through the peephole. Evelyn stood there, her gray coat buttoned tight, her face drawn, clutching her purse like a shield. I took a deep breath, my hand on the knob, and opened the door. "Mom," I said, my voice even, not inviting her in yet. She looked at me, her eyes searching, her lips parting as if to speak but hesitating. "Lauren, I didn't know," she started, her voice softer than I'd expected. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, gesturing her in but kept my posture firm, arms crossed loosely. "We can talk, but on my terms." She sat at the kitchen table, her purse in her lap, her fingers fidgeting with the strap. I stayed standing, leaning against the counter, the notepad beside me like a silent ally. "What you did in court," I began, my voice steady but low, "wasn't just about the kids. It was about tearing me down again in front of everyone." She flinched, her hands tightening on the purse. "I thought I was protecting them," she said, her tone defensive but quieter than usual. "I didn't know you were a judge." The word sounded foreign in her mouth, like she was still grappling with it. I nodded, my fingers brushing the counter's edge. "You didn't know because you never asked, Mom. You assumed I was failing, like always." Her eyes dropped to the table, her shoulders sagging slightly. "I raised you to be strong," she said, almost a whisper. "I thought pushing you would help." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. "Pushing? You dismissed me? Every achievement, every step, you compared me to Claire or ignored me." I paused, softening my tone but keeping it firm. "I'm not that kid anymore. I'm a judge, a wife, and now a guardian to Mia and Ethan. If you want to be in their lives, or mine, you need to respect that." She looked up, her eyes glistening, but I didn't waver. I slid the notepad toward her, where I'd written 3 clear rules. No unsolicited criticism, no comparing me to Claire, and respect for our family's decisions. "These are my boundaries," I said, tapping the paper. "Follow them, or you don't get to be part of this." Her lips parted, shock flashing across her face, but she nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the notepad. I'll try," she said, her voice shaky. I nodded, stepping back. "Trying's a start, but it's on you to show it." She left shortly after, the door clicking shut behind her, and I sank into a chair, my hands trembling slightly. The confrontation wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming my space. I glanced at the fridge where Mia's latest drawing hung, a bright crayon house with 4 stick figures. That was my focus now, not Evelyn's approval. Later, when Tom got home, I told him about the visit, my head resting on his shoulder as we sat on the couch. "You set the line," he said, kissing my temple. "Proud of you." I smiled, feeling lighter, the boundaries like a fortress I'd built, not to keep her out entirely, but to protect what mattered most. A few weeks after setting boundaries with Evelyn, I sat in my chambers at the courthouse, the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the quiet as I reviewed case files. The morning had been busy, 3 hearings, each one a delicate balance of law and human emotion. But now, in this rare moment of pause, my mind drifted to how I could use my role to make a difference beyond my own story. The wooden desk was cluttered with papers, a photo of Tom, Mia, and Ethan tucked into the corner, their smiles a reminder of why I'd fought so hard. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers brushing the frame, and felt a quiet resolve take root. My journey, overcoming Evelyn's doubts, building a life on my terms, could be more than personal. It could reshape how I approached my work, my legacy, and even the family name I'd once felt burdened by. I'd always seen my judgeship as a job of service, but now it felt like a platform. Every day I saw families like mine, fractured, misunderstood, fighting for their kids. I thought of a case from earlier that week. A mother, young and scared, trying to regain custody after a mistake, her eyes pleading as she described her recovery. I'd listened, not just as a judge, but as someone who knew what it felt like to be judged unfairly. I'd ruled in her favor, with conditions, and watched her shoulders sag with relief, her hands trembling as she thanked me. That moment stuck with me, her gratitude echoing the spark I'd felt in the courtroom against Evelyn. I wanted to do more. To ensure the system saw people for who they were, not who others claimed they were. I pulled out a notepad, the same kind I'd used to set boundaries with Evelyn, and started jotting ideas. Training for caseworkers on recognizing hidden strengths in parents. Workshops for judges on avoiding bias from family testimony. Maybe even a community program to support guardians like Tom and me, stepping in for kids like Mia and Ethan. My pen moved quickly, the ink smudging slightly as I wrote, my thoughts spilling out. I remembered Claire's struggles, how the system had failed her early on, and how Evelyn's rigid expectations hadn't helped. If I could advocate for better resources, counseling, mentorship, second chances, I could honor Claire's kids by preventing other families from breaking apart. Later that day, I met with my colleague Judge Patel, over coffee in the courthouse cafeteria. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I stirred sugar into my cup, my spoon clinking softly. "I'm thinking of proposing a training initiative," I said, leaning forward, my elbows on the table. "Something to help us spot resilience in parents, not just their flaws." She raised an eyebrow, sipping her coffee. "Like your case? That was eye-opening." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the mug. "Exactly. My mother's testimony could have swayed things if we hadn't had evidence. How many don't get that chance?" She leaned back, thoughtful, her fingers tapping the table. "It's a good idea, Lauren. Start small, maybe a pilot program. I'll back you." Her support felt like a door opening, and I smiled, my shoulders relaxing. Back home that evening, I shared the idea with Tom as we cooked dinner, the kitchen filled with the sizzle of onions and the kids' chatter from the living room. He chopped peppers, his knife steady, and glanced at me. "You're turning it into something bigger," he said, his voice warm with pride. I nodded, stirring the sauce, the wooden spoon warm in my hand. "It's not just about us anymore. It's about making sure kids like Mia and Ethan, parents like that mom I saw today, get a fair shot." He set the knife down, pulling me into a quick hug, his hands smelling faintly of bell peppers. "You're reclaiming it all," he said, and I knew he meant more than the case, the name, the pain, the past. By the next week, I drafted a proposal, my laptop screen glowing late into the night as I typed, Mia's stuffed bear propped on the desk for company. I sent it to the judicial board, my fingers hovering over the send button before clicking, a small thrill in my chest. At dinner, I told Mia and Ethan about it, keeping it simple. "I'm trying to help other kids find good homes like you did." Ethan grinned, his fork paused mid-bite. "Like superheroes?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Kinda, buddy." Mia looked thoughtful, her crayon pausing over her placemat. "Will it help Mommy too?" she asked, meaning Claire. I swallowed, my hand resting on hers. "I hope so, sweetheart." That night, as I tucked them in, their small hands in mine, I felt the weight of the Thompson name shift. Not a burden now, but a tool for change, one I was forging on my own terms. The soft clink of dishes filled our kitchen as I washed plates from dinner, the soapy water warm against my hands, the evening light slanting through the window. Mia and Ethan were in the living room, their voices a gentle hum as they played a board game with Tom, his laughter punctuating their excited shouts over a rolled dice. I paused, sponge in hand, and leaned against the sink, my eyes drifting to the fridge where Mia's latest drawing hung, a bright crayon scene of our family, complete with a lopsided dog we didn't own yet. A smile tugged at my lips, but beneath it, a quiet realization was settling in, one that had been building since the courtroom, through the boundaries with Evelyn, through the work I'd started to reshape the system. It wasn't about proving myself to her anymore. It was about knowing my worth, deep in my bones, without needing her nod of approval. I dried my hands, the towel rough against my skin, and walked to the living room, leaning against the doorway. Tom glanced up, mid-argument with Ethan over a game rule, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Help me out here, Judge," he teased, winking. I laughed, shaking my head, and sank onto the couch, watching Mia carefully place her game piece, her tongue peeking out in concentration. This was my piece, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of this life we'd built. I thought back to the courtroom, Evelyn's stunned silence when my judgeship was revealed, the way her accusations crumbled. For years I'd chased her validation, each achievement a silent plea for her to see me. But standing in that courtroom, speaking my truth, I'd realized something profound. Her approval was a mirage, always shifting, never mine to hold. I pulled my knees up, hugging them as I watched the kids. Ethan's hair fell into his eyes as he grinned, triumphant over a winning move, and Mia's quiet focus reminded me of myself at her age, trying so hard to be enough. I'd spent decades measuring myself against Evelyn's yardstick, her praise for Claire, her dismissal of me. But now I saw it clearly. Her judgment wasn't about me. It was her own lens, her own limits. I didn't need her to tell me I was steady, capable, loving. I saw it in Mia's trust when she crawled into my lap after a bad dream, in Ethan's excitement when I cheered at his soccer games, in Tom's steady hand in mine through every storm. My worth wasn't in her words, it was in these moments, in the life I'd built despite her. I stood, joining the game, sliding onto the rug beside Mia. She handed me a die, her small fingers brushing mine. "Your turn," she said, her eyes bright. I rolled, laughing when I landed on a penalty space, Tom's mock groan filling the room. As we played, I thought of the proposal I'd sent to the judicial board, the one Judge Patel had backed. It was approved yesterday, a pilot program to train caseworkers on spotting resilience in parents, set to start next month. I'd poured my story into it. Not the details, but the truth of it. That people can be more than their past, more than others' perceptions. It felt like a piece of me, a way to carry forward what I'd learned without being tethered to Evelyn's shadow. Later, after the kids were tucked in, their soft snores echoing down the hall, I sat on the back porch with Tom, a blanket draped over us. The night was cool, stars pricking the sky, the air smelling faintly of grass. I leaned against him, my head on his shoulder, his arm warm around me. "I used to think I needed her to be proud of me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head, his cheek brushing my hair. "And now?" I smiled, my fingers tracing the blanket's edge. "Now I'm proud of me, that's enough." He kissed my temple, his breath warm, and we sat in silence, the world quiet except for the crickets and our steady breathing. This was my validation, not Evelyn's faltering apologies, not even the courtroom win, but this certainty inside me. I was enough. For Mia, for Ethan, for Tom, for the families I served in court. As I looked out at the dark yard, imagining the swing set we'd build for the kids, I felt a peace that didn't depend on anyone else. It was mine, hard-won and unshakable. So, what do you think? Did I stand up for myself enough? Or could I have pushed harder? Growing up under someone's constant criticism can make you question your worth, but finding that strength to define it for yourself? That's the real win. Have you ever had to break free from someone's judgment to see your own value? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your own path. Keep shining, because your worth isn't in anyone else's eyes, it's in you.